Ladies and gentlemen,
good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have a bit of a different show. We have our Ask Me Anything episode today. So these are questions that I have been provided by you as the listeners or along the way, along the journey in our day-to-day practice that I want to provide answers to you for in a quick podcast session. So today I'll run through a few. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, then please send it to us at podcasts@aspectlegal.com.au, and we'll put that link in the show note. Now, here we go with a very quick session for you. Nigel, thanks for coming onto the show to our Ask Me Anything section. What can I answer for you today?
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to discuss is that we find that accountants are the key players, quite often key players in transactions, because they're a trusted advisor to the business owner. What we are finding, however, is that on occasion the accountants are giving advice that's probably not market relevant anymore. They may have been the accountant for 20 years. They don't want to let go. They've never actually sold a business or sold many businesses, and they're not up to speed on where the market is. And because of that, the seller may get poor advice. Recently, we've had a NDIS business where NDIS, the license is tied to the company, and the accountant has refused to sell the business, to do a share sale and set an asset sale, which has killed 6 deals for us with this one seller, and she will not budge. So how do we cope with that, Joe? What would you suggest? How can we get accountants better informed?
Yeah, that is a really tough one. It's something that I've seen in the market as well, and I've spoken to a number of people about. I think that the very first thing, and look, we have a lot of accountants who listen into this show. So the very first thing, is on the accountant side is the importance of education, but it's also that education for our buyers and our sellers to understand when they can push back against the advice that they're receiving. And I think the reality is, there's this difference between an accountant who can serve a business in terms of the general day-to-day accounting or compliance function versus accountants who deal regularly in business sale and acquisition transactions. And they can be two completely different things. And that shouldn't be an embarrassment to an accountant. That shouldn't be, I think the most important thing is for the accountants to understand, and for indeed our buyers and sellers, our clients to understand, that it's not a failing in their accountant's skill set. It's just that most accountants don't regularly deal with businesses that are buying or selling, because many businesses only ever sell once in the life cycle of one particular owner. And the reality then means that they very rarely come across businesses that are being bought and sold, as opposed to, us in the market who are dealing with hundreds of buyers and sellers, generally in any, particular year. So, the first thing is to not have this misunderstanding that accountants are expected or should understand this stuff. You go to the people who deal regularly in the market, like you guys as brokers, like us from a legal perspective, where we deal almost entirely 60% of our business is dealing in sales and acquisition. So we do it all day, every day. It's being able to know who to turn to for that particular advice. The second thing is to understand that there can be the information that you're getting from your accountant, and maybe even from a lawyer if you're dealing with a lawyer who doesn't deal in this space very often, or any other advisor who's advising your business that doesn't deal in this space very often, is that they're not necessarily right just because they're a professional within their their professional space. And I think this concept of value is super important. I've seen it so many times where sellers go to market pushing back on what brokers have said, brokers who have a real understanding of what's happening in the market, because they believe the information that's been provided by an advisor, say, for example, an accountant or someone else who is basing, using sort of, these sort of set multiples in their mind of what businesses as a whole are worth, rather than an understanding of, the fact that there's industry differences between businesses, and that this whole 3 times profit is not like the lens that you can put on every single business in every single instance, because like that's what can happen, right? But then we have these sellers who come to market and then get a buyer and then get a deal and then suddenly think, do you know what? I think I could get a better deal out there. So they cast away that deal that you guys as brokers probably know is actually a really good deal. And we quite often know that often the first deal is actually the best to come to a seller on the market, but they push that to the side, go for something else because they think their accountant has given them a belief that there's more value that they can get out of the market if they stay there. And then they just sit there for ages and get stagnant, and that's a sad thing to watch. When when we can all sort of see the train wreck, the writing on the wall, in advance, I guess.
No, I think you're quite correct. There's nothing worse than a business sitting there for 12, 18 months because it's overpriced, and the seller won't listen because they've had advice from a third-party expert. It may be an accountant or not, but even sometimes from one of their friends who sold their business and knows everything about it.
Exactly. And their friend down the street that, just happened to get a great deal and, now they're extrapolating it across everything else. Absolutely. And did you have a second question, Nigel?
I do actually, Jo. Yeah. So one of my frustrations in the market is we're constantly qualifying brokers and moving people through the chain to build our team. The qualification's a real estate qualification, and it really has very little to do with business broking. And I've been pleased to see New South Wales and Western Australia introduce CPD that is relevant to business brokers. However, there doesn't seem to be enough content. What I'd really like to see, and this is the question, what opportunity do you believe there is to get a national license for business brokers that actually requires a training to be a business broker, that maybe needs some financial competency, that maybe needs some understanding of how businesses run? Because that's where I'd really like to see that moving in Australia, so that we do get a better qualified industry. People are real estate agents who occasionally might sell a business. Most business brokers out there function as business brokers on a full-time basis and do a good job. But I feel so sorry for our clients who've been with a regional real estate agent who's listed them, charged them advertising fees and taken it nowhere in 12 months because they've lost a year of their life. And so how can we get there? How can we get a better system so brokers are better trained and real estate agents are not allowed to sell businesses?
Oh, do you know what? I so agree with you, Nigel. I remember when I first started doing a lot of work in this market and realised that, that the licensing for brokers was attached to real estate. I just couldn't even understand it because I'd come from larger M&A deals and that's, it can be a different space. You're dealing with corporate advisors in that space who have a different regime. But when you come into the space of SMEs dealing with the sale and acquisition of businesses and realise that it's connected to property, I couldn't even see the connection. Like, what is the connection of property and business sale? Because in my mind, they are completely separate beasts and require a completely different skill set, and also profile of someone who is successful as a broker. Because I see the success of brokers, and indeed, these brokers are all in your team as well, Nigel. I see the success in the sort of outfit that you guys run, because the brokers come at it from the perspective of being able to manage a lot of information and a lot of moving parts, because business sales are one of these things where there's just so many things going on in different areas. There's a lot of counterparties as well. So you don't just have buyer and seller. You have the landlord, then you have the lawyers for everyone, and you have this sort of like this balancing act that you have to do between a whole heap of different parties. And then there's these nuances of legislation that are really complex. So, for example, employee entitlements and understanding the structure of, a business sale versus a share sale, and understanding, what the impact of legislation, for example, the Retail Leases Act that might have a different approach on disclosure requirements, and therefore the period of time that might be required for ensuring that you've ticked all the boxes that you need to tick, as opposed to property that perhaps is a lot less. It doesn't have all of those issues in it, I guess, is the point. So are we heading, or will we ever head towards a national licensing regime? There's been a lot of talk in the market about it. I'm a huge advocate for that, because I think at the moment there's just too much difference between the states, and we deal all the time between the states, primarily Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales, but all of the rest of Australia as well. But I'm constantly dealing with the difference in each of the states, not just states in terms of the type of contracts that they use as standard form contracts between the states, which are laughable in terms of some of the differences. It's just bizarre, some of the differences that are in there. But also the way brokers work in each of those markets can be quite different as well. I think in Australia, we're crying out for a national approach. I think it would be really good. It would be good for, it just is something that buyers and sellers would really benefit from, but also this approach for the education and the licensing regime to acknowledge the difficulty and the different type of legislation and considerations that are relevant in the business sale market as opposed to the property market. So I'm with you. I just, I've been talking to a lot of people over the last couple of years about this. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that we're going to be disconnected from property anytime soon. And because I think the regulatory task is just too hard. But I think we within the industry can therefore help to achieve what is probably unlikely to happen in the short term future from a regulation perspective. We within the industry can be drivers of the importance of a deeper kind of education, and that education really focusing on the things that make a difference in our industry, which are all of those things that I talked about, the understanding of employee entitlements, which I find is actually super complicated and really misunderstood in our industry, and all of the other legislation that brokers ideally would be on top of in understanding what's happening in a business sale environment. And of course, then there's those soft skills that I also think are really important in terms of understanding how to deal with change management, that transition for teams as people move from one business to another. That's like, I don't know, that's like a whole nother level as well. But that isn't a whole other level of training that I think is particularly important and useful in this space, which, has no relevance in the property industry.
Thanks for that. Yeah, absolutely agree. I think from a training perspective, AIBB do a very good job. And we're putting our staff through those programs as well, just to improve their level of understanding. We do a lot of in-house training, but I think a national business broker qualification that is recognised in each state would be a major step forward with a larger business content, financials, how to run a business, systems, all that. So you can actually understand what a business is doing and how to value or praise it properly and to take it forward. Yeah.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And good call out there to the AIBB. Really, they really are trying to step up the education in the industry. And I just think they're doing some brilliant things, and a really important body to have, so that we have a body that's advocating for business brokers and the industry within Australia. So great call out there. And we'll certainly in our show notes, we'll link through to AIBB for anyone who's listening and doesn't know much about them, might be interested in some of their programs. And hey, it looks like Nigel might be looking for brokers as well. So we might put a link through to, to you and the team there. Wonderful. Thanks for coming on the show today, Nigel.
Thank you, Joan. Pleasure being here.
Well, that's it for our Ask Me Anything episode today. I hope you found that useful. Now, we've got a few more of these style podcasts coming up soon. I find it invaluable to be able to answer these top-of-mind questions, whether they're from our guests, our audience, or our client. Now, if you have a specific topic or question that you'd like us to discuss, then submit your Ask Me Anything questions to podcast@aspectlegal.com.au or check out the show notes to this episode where we will link right through to an email for you to submit your Ask Me Anything questions. And an important reminder that if you would like any legal assistance with matters that you're working on at the moment, then don't forget you can book in for an initial free call directly with our legal eagles at Aspect Legal by heading to our homepage at aspectlegal.com.au. Well, that's it for me today. My name is Joanna Oakey, and you've been listening to another wonderful episode of our podcast, proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.